Tim from the future here. So, literally, as I was uploading this video, Gaijin dropped a post about decompressing the battle ratings above 10.0. Just be aware that by the time you see this, the battle rating on this aircraft may have changed to 13.7. When the Saab JAS-39 Gripen originally entered service, it presented an enormous leap forward in performance for the Swedish Air Force, and it was at least as capable as basically any other fighter in the world. However, production of the original model was proceeding slowly, and before the initial production order was completed, it was recognized that the jet was going to need some upgrades in order to remain competitive with the latest foreign designs, especially as potential export sales were being explored. One of the primary goals for the jet moving forward was achieving full NATO compatibility, as this was basically going to be a mandatory prerequisite before any of the potential customers were going to sign on. And in 1997, an order was placed by Sweden for an upgraded series of Gripen fighters. The new model was the JAS-39C, and featured some significant internal modifications from the original version of the jet, along with expanded weapons compatibility. After some delays in the development program, mostly involving the electronics, it was finally introduced into service in 2002. This new version, nicknamed the Export Gripen, was focused on achieving the NATO compatibility that I mentioned a few moments ago, and also for allowing easier modification into minor subversions to fit niche requirements that customers might have in the future a little bit more easily, though in practice those minor tweaks have been, well, pretty minor, and mostly just focused on specific weapons compatibility. Saab has done fairly well in exporting the Gripen, thanks in part to their openness and willingness for full technology transfer deals and helping customers set up local production lines, with Brazil in particular expected to be exporting their own Brazilian-made Gripens at some point during the next decade. Sweden has also been pretty open to lease-to-buy arrangements and pretty generous financing, and in a few cases it beat out the F-16 and Rafale almost entirely because of these financial and logistical factors. As of 2024, the Gripen C is flown by Sweden, the Czech Republic, Brazil, South Africa, Hungary, and Thailand, with roughly a dozen other countries in some level of purchase or lease negotiations. What we're looking at in War Thunder are three versions of the C model Gripen: the plain JAS-39C in the Swedish tree, the South African C model in the UK tree, and the Hungarian EBS-HU-C model in the Italian tree. These three planes are incredibly similar, with the only noticeable difference being some variations in loadouts, and I'm covering all three for this review. These jets are all at battle rating 13.0 for air battles and 12.7 for ground. You get a full ballistics computer with all of the modern features, and the AR-830 radar warning receiver that tracks E through J bands with really good performance. The radar is the PS-05A. This is an I-band set with multiple pulse Doppler modes, a helmet-mounted sight, and up to 4 data link targets at once. For loadouts, the 39Cs can take a pretty good selection of missiles, countermeasures, drop tanks, bombs, rockets, guided munitions, and even a targeting pod. The wingtip pylons are dedicated for air-to-air missiles, but the 4 wing pylons can carry a more wide variety of options. The 3 Gripens have largely the same loadouts, with the primary difference between the planes being its guided missiles, which you can see in the matrix here on the screen. The IR missiles you get are the AIM-9L and M, along with the RB-74. The RB-74 is almost identical to the 9L, with the only difference being a minor fin angle rating that you're never going to notice in actual gameplay, while the RB-74M is in fact identical to the AIM-9M. By now, you've seen these missiles while going up the tech tree, and the 9 Mike is going to be your best close-in dogfighting missile. The 3 active radar missiles are the AIM-120A, R-Darter, and the RB-99, which is identical to the 120A. The R-Darter is slightly lighter and has slightly more Delta-V, but it also packs a smaller warhead than the other two. All three of these weapons have inertial guidance and data link with a terminal homing range of about 16 kilometers. For air-to-ground weapons, all three jets get a few options for laser-guided bombs. The GBU-24 is generally my favorite, as it's got the inertial guidance, so if you lose the laze for a moment or two, it'll keep going, and it's also got an enormous warhead. There are also a whole bunch of different Mavericks to choose from. All of them are TV guided except the AGM-65G, which is infrared. But remember that all of these are very slow weapons, and if you fire them from safer ranges, Panzer S1, it can take quite a while for them to reach the target, and a lot can happen before they connect. In terms of flight performance, the 39C is in kind of a weird spot. I say that because the Snail constantly buffs and nerfs the flight model for the Gripens back and forth as people whine and complain that either it's too good or it's not good enough. Because of that, I'm going to have to speak in generalities a little bit more than usual here, but a few basics are typically true regardless of the buff-nerf cycle. In essence, this jet is insanely maneuverable at anything but super slow speeds or Mach infinity. It's got reasonable engine power for a top-tier jet, and it can even retain a lot of its flight performance through some medium damage. However, it's a very light aircraft, so fuel weight and weapon loads will have a pretty serious impact on how it flies. I usually take the centerline drop tank as part of my loadout, but I try to ditch it when I'm done with BVR or if I get intercepted. Another thing to know is that while the Gripen is fragile, it can sometimes still remain flightworthy after surprising levels of damage, so don't be in a rush to J out. You never know what might make it back to base. Taking the C-model Gripens out into air battles feels pretty similar to other light fighters at the top tier. You've got the performance to do any combination of BVR and visual range combat, but the load of only 6 missiles means that you might have to be slightly more picky with your shots compared to like an F-15 or a flanker. With the disclaimer that as of making this video, the ARH meta is really still developing. I've had a fair amount of success using the Gripen to fly up to altitude and try for some BVR shots, and also using it to stay low during the opening phases, trying to get in close for knife fighting. Both can work, or really even a combination of the two. More often, a combination of the two actually. Like starting off high looking for BVR, then going in low once things get a little too defensive or you run out of targets. The huge supply of countermeasures is a notable asset, and it can sometimes allow you to get a little more risky with your active radar missile shots, since you can get in a little closer and put yourself inside the MAR with a tiny bit more safety. The real area where the Gripen excels, though, is close-in fighting. If you can get this thing within like 1 or 2 kilometers at a good energy state, most other jets are going to have a really hard time shaking you off, and it'll often be a pretty easy kill for you. In terms of ground attack, it's got the ordnance to do some strike fighter stuff out in air battles, but I can't really recommend that. The load is too light to rack up any serious points, and the real strength here is going to be with air combat. Over a ground battle, the LGBs and the Mavericks can be very effective, and my usual suggestion is to go with a mixed loadout of just 2 anti-tank weapons and the rest air-to-air, so you can do the whole swing roll fighter thing and perform fighter sweeps and ground strikes in the same sortie. Less ground kills per sortie, but more flexibility and better survivability, since the extra air-to-air pylons are going to allow for more countermeasures. Visually, this jet looks just like the A-model Gripen, which is to say, pretty awesome. The 3D model is very well detailed, but unfortunately all the skins we have in the game, so far at least, are pretty bland looking. Landing this jet is broadly similar to other top-tier jets, but you don't get a drag chute. Now, because I know if I don't mention this, I'll get a bunch of actually comments, you can angle the canards down after you touch down to create a small amount of extra drag after landing, but you probably won't notice the difference. You can drop gear at about 600 kilometers an hour, but no landing flaps. The cockpit is outstanding. Great visibility in all directions, huge MFDs, and a full HUD displayed on the helmet-mounted sight. One of the best planes in the game for a VR headset. To close out on 3 models of the JAS-39C. These jets have high-performance active radar missiles, a good selection of air-to-ground guided weapons, S-tier dogfight performance, an insane amount of countermeasures, and an excellent cockpit for VR. However, the performance takes a pretty big hit from fuel and weapon weights. You're going to be blacking out constantly if your pilot isn't a fully upgraded Max Ace, and it can only take 6 missiles. The final verdict on the JAS-39C is that these 3 jets provide their respective tech trees with a high-performance light fighter that'll probably be competitive all the way until stealth is introduced to the game at some point, and are absolutely worth the grind from whichever tech tree you happen to be in. As always, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, check out this other one.